The landscape of the running back position is one that is very difficult to parse through in Dynasty Fantasy Football, but today we're going to tackle it in 3 different segments, going through our cornerstone running back rankings, running backs 24 years old or under, 25 to 30-year-old running backs after that in our veteran running back rankings for Dynasty, and then culminating all kind of in the top 36 overall running back tier list that we're going to tackle here. So should be a fun conversation. A lot of up and down differing opinions at this position. So it should be a fun one. Like I said, if you enjoy, leave a like down below, subscribe. If you're new around here, check out flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE for all of our rankings. You can get 7 days for free and 30% off right now. But with that being said, let's get into it. All right, so if you skipped the intro, basically what we're doing and what we did in yesterday's video with the wide receivers as well is we're tackling our cornerstone running back rankings first. In Dynasty, cornerstone running backs are not really a thing, but if your running back is age 24 or younger, we consider them a cornerstone running back. And then we're going to tackle veteran running backs 25 and older after this. So, more so guys that you're looking at for production contending windows. And then at the end, we'll show kind of how they interact with each other in a top 36 overall running back rankings for Dynasty. So, these guys are going to top the list in both the top 36 as well as the cornerstone rankings. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Breece Hall. These guys are the only running backs in Dynasty, realistically, that you can project 3 to 4 years of RB1 production. All 3 guys are top 10, top 12 redraft picks right now, in addition to being 22 years old or under at the running back position. So, again, I don't think I have to really hammer home how valuable these guys are. If you don't believe me, go try and trade for one. And I've been trying to do it across a couple of leagues this year. Getting Bijan, getting Jahmyr Gibbs, getting Breece Hall, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg because they are just that head and shoulders above the rest of the running back position. You can see the difference in value that we have listed there. It costs 2 first plus to potentially go out and get these guys versus the next tier of cornerstone running backs. Even if we're talking the contending guys, it's more like 1 mid to late first rounder that you're paying.
Yeah, and the reason why these guys are in that tier, and you notice there's a big stark difference between that top 3 tier versus really the rest of the rankings, because we go from 2 first plus to 1 mid to late first rounder to we're already talking about second round type of liquidity. So the reason why these guys stick out as opposed to the rest of the class is that, quite frankly, we're talking about these 3 guys as being first round level projections in best ball at this current point. Bijan Robinson, 7 overall ADP. Breece Hall, 7.7 ADP. Jahmyr Gibbs, 12 overall ADP. All top 12 overall picks, all high projectable workloads, all offenses that maybe aren't all like Detroit's, like what Jahmyr Gibbs is. We can expect Detroit to be, a top 5 to 8 unit in the league. I do feel like the Atlanta Falcons and the New York Jets, with their potential quarterback upgrades, Kirk Cousins coming into Atlanta, Aaron Rodgers potentially being healthy this year for the New York Jets, that they're going to be able to be projectable plus offenses. Even if they're not top 5 to 8, I do feel like the Falcons and the Jets should find their way within the top 12 to 15 overall. And these running backs are do it all, every down type of workhorses, 20 plus touch projections, younger than 23 years old. There's no reason why they shouldn't be the clear top tier at running back.
Yeah, absolutely. With these 3 guys, like I said, try and acquire them. If you don't have them on your roster right now, go try and trade for them. Because I've sent some bonkers packages for these guys and I've not been able to secure their services, especially in leagues where my Bush League Best Ball Dynasty, I have like a monster team and I've tried my hardest to go and get one of these guys and I can't do it. The managers are really, really stingy with these dudes, and rightfully so. They're the only running backs in Dynasty as it currently stands. Maybe we'll see this change next year when we have a better running back class coming into the league. They're really the only running backs that you can say confidently are 3 to 4 year RB1 projections for the next couple years in redraft. Moving down to the next tier of running backs, both of these guys took a hit in the NFL draft. Devon Achane and Kyron Williams both had 3rd round running backs added to their backfield, Jalen Wright and Blake Corum respectively. I think with both of these guys, the draw is kind of different. With Devon Achane, he's this efficient, do-it-all speed back who can contribute as a receiver, but he's never going to probably command more than like 3 or 4 games this year with more than like 15 touches. Like, he's the type of guy that's going to be efficient on his work, have high value touches, high volume passing offense, or high volume scoring offense, where you're going to be put in positions to score the football and get, long plays down the field. Whereas Kyron Williams was more last year of just like a pure workload guy. He was absolutely getting one of the better workloads in the league outside of like Christian McCaffrey. Realistically, he was getting the best workload in the league. But now the thing that he did well was a workload, and it's being threatened by Blake Corum coming in. So I think with both of these guys, the one that took the bigger hit to me was Kyron, because his draw was workload, whereas Jalen Wright coming in, he's going to supplement that offense. I think he's more of a threat to Raheem Mostert than he is to Devon Achane. Not to mention, this offense has always used multiple running backs, and Devon Achane was never going to be a 15 to 20 touch guy week in and week out. So with both of these guys, I feel less concerned about Devon Achane, what happened in the NFL draft, but I'm still pretty bullish, I would say, on both guys. Like, I mean, both of them are going second, third round redraft for a reason, and they're both 22, 23 years old with a couple years left of team control.
Yeah, so for reference, they're both going at the back end of the second right now in terms of underdog best ball. Kyron Williams, 20.8 overall ADP, Devon Achane, 23.0. And you can argue between them. Obviously, like you said, the case study for Kyron Williams, obviously the big breakout year that he had, commanding a ton of volume in that McVay Rams scheme. The issue is that Blake Corum is kind of like almost a one-for-one clone versus what Kyron does well and doesn't do well. Kyron, obviously not this big, explosive chunk runner. Neither is Blake Corum, but what they do so well from a consistency standpoint between the tackles, contributing a little bit out of the passing game, being able to score in goal line areas. Blake Corum is the exact archetype Kyron Williams is. Now, I will say, obviously, you got to lessen the damper a little bit, knowing that Blake Corum is there. But I do feel like he doesn't have to be a 22 touch per game back to be a really good back. Kyron Williams is still a very efficient running back last year, but he can still hedge it on being a good offense, assuming Stafford, assuming McVay are there. And although Blake Corum's there to potentially take 10 to 13 touches per game, I still view Kyron Williams as the RB1 on that team. And even though it's not a crystal clean 22 touch per game type of workload, which is what we saw last year, if we could have expected that going into this year, Kyron Williams would have been a first round pick. There's a reason why now he's going at the back end of the second. People are accounting for Blake Corum, and I do feel like his price is appropriate based off the type of impact we can expect Corum to have. But Devon Achane, I'm actually more likely to buy into him now, just looking at how impressive he was as a rookie. Now, I understand Jalen Wright coming in, fourth round running back. We both had him graded way higher than that as top 3 running backs in this class. But at the same time, like you said, Raheem Mostert actually had the significant share of the backfield last year. Raheem Mostert got the most touches on the team. And I want to run you a fun fact here. So Devon Achane, third round rookie coming in. Obviously, we know early on he wasn't going to get the big workload, but when you actually look at the scope of his season last year, you'll notice that he played 11 games. One of them, he only played 4% of the snaps, 1.5 fantasy points. And the 10 games that he played where he received significant amount of snaps, at least over 10% of the snaps, we're talking about a guy that only 14 touches per game, averaged nearly 19 PPR points per game. And I understand people are going to look at the numbers. They're going to say 7.77 yards per carry is unsustainable. The amount of overall touchdown volume he saw on his touches, unsustainable. But we're also talking about a 14 touch per game workload. If Devon Achane is the talent that he showed on those touches last year, he could well be within store of 16, 18 touches per game. And I do feel like that 16, 18 touch per game, 4 to 5 touch per game type of increase he could see will offset some of the efficiency concerns, obviously tailing off. Maybe instead of 7.77 yards per carry he averaged last year, maybe that's more so in the low 6s, high 5s. But because he's going to be receiving more volume overall, I don't have as much of a concern on it.
Yeah, exactly. I think we've talked about these guys a lot. It's just both of them just are risky. Like, they're both high upside options. It's just that, is Kyron going to get the workload again? Is Devon Achane going to see a volume increase? I saw Ryan Heath from Fantasy Points tweeted this out. 9 of the last 10 major volume increases that we've seen, like 7+ touches per game or more, have come from second-year running backs. So you're talking about in that second year, you're usually more inclined to see a big workload increase. And one of those guys was actually Rachaad White, I believe, on that list. Alvin Kamara, a guy that kind of profiles similar to what Devon Achane did his rookie season, very efficient. Got a lot more touches his second year and eventually finished as a top 5 running back that season. So again, up in the air with these guys, but I do believe both of them are pretty valuable dynasty assets to have. Next tier guys we have here, Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson, both rookies, and then Kenneth Walker, James Cook in this area. With all these guys, I mean, Benson and Brooks haven't done it yet because they're rookies, and they come into situations which I think both fit their skill sets very well. Jonathan Brooks going to be asked kind of to play the Rachaad White role. He can do that. He can catch the ball. He can work in between the tackles. Trey Benson going to basically be asked to do what James Conner does, which is physical downhill running as well as contributing as a receiver. Both of these guys very much have the ability to climb tiers and running back ranks pretty quickly, especially knowing, like I said earlier in the video, there is no real 4 to 5 year projections at running back at this position. And Brooks and Benson being 21, 22 years old with 4 years of team control upcoming, you got legitimate options here to actually challenge maybe a mini tier behind Bijan, Gibbs, and Breece Hall. If they hit their upper range of outcomes, they could be top 4, top 5 dynasty running backs. Whereas Kenneth Walker and James Cook, who are also in this tier, probably don't have that kind of ceiling. Like I think James Cook's ceiling is probably like a top 10 redraft running back, top 12 redraft running back. Same with Kenneth Walker's, but both guys are good players attached to good offenses. We kind of know what we're getting out of those guys. So within this tier, you have projectable volume, projectable guys versus upside hammers.
Exactly. And people might be looking at this saying, well, the RB1, the RB2 in this past class, like, why aren't they a little bit higher? Or some people might come in with a different frame of mind. How can you have Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson in the same tier as Kenneth Walker and James Cook, knowing what they can provide in redraft? And it's kind of balancing both sides here. It's understanding that the value accrual potential of Jonathan Brooks, of Trey Benson, lend itself to the point where after their rookie seasons, I personally would be shocked if they didn't climb a tier, if they weren't in that Devon Achane, Kyron Williams area, because I do believe in both these guys as talents. The problem with putting them there right now is that Devon Achane and Kyron Williams are legitimate top 24 overall ranked best ball players. Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson, like, you're getting around pick 100 right now. So there is a stark difference in terms of the projectable workload in year one. And I understand if you're a tanking team, you're a house money team, and this is not your top peak contending window, this is the time where I want to be acquiring Jonathan Brooks, where I want to be acquiring Trey Benson, because I do feel like by this time next year, they will be consensus top 68 running backs in Dynasty.
Yeah, not to mention with Kenneth Walker and James Cook, like the difference between them and Devon Achane and Kyron Williams is that like they're dead zone running backs in redraft. Like Kenneth Walker's like a 5th round pick, James Cook like a 5th, 6th round pick as well. So again, you're sacrificing a little bit of that redraft upside of Kenneth Walker and James Cook to go after the value accumulation potential of Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson. It all kind of depends on what you need, but technically both like all 4 of these running backs are under 24, so they technically all fit into the cornerstone running back rankings area. The next tier we have is mainly like when we get to the top 36, it was mainly made up of like guys that are like 26 years old, 25 years old that have good projectable workloads. Javonte Williams, Tajay Spears are the only guys that were under 24 in this area. Javonte Williams is kind of like the wild card of all dynasty running backs right now, because me and you both believe in his ability. And there was a point in time where he was thought of as a potential top 5 dynasty running back, and he was actually ranked that high at one point in time. And then Tajay Spears is a guy that had a lot of hype coming into the offseason. Then it got squashed by Tony Pollard signing there. And he's going to obviously factor into the workload there. But I think both of these guys really also have the potential to climb up the running back rankings. We don't know with Javonte Williams what his workload's going to be. We don't know what Tajay Spears' workload's going to be. But I think both are talented players. I think both offenses are ascending. I believe in the young quarterbacks that they have there with Bo Nix and with Will Levis. And either of these offenses have a chance to be like this year's Green Bay Packers that really surprise people, really, get out and score a lot of points. And it wouldn't totally shock me if Javonte Williams was a top 12 redraft running back this year. Like, it wouldn't shock me. If he goes out there, he's fully healthy, 2nd year removed from the ACL tear, and he has a back-end RB1 season, he's going to probably climb himself up to the top 10, top 12 dynasty running back range. And Tajay Spears, we just talked about it with Achane. Year 2 running backs often see a big-time workload increase. Tony Pollard looked completely washed last year with the Dallas Cowboys. It's possible that the Titans midway through the season are regretting that contract, almost kind of like the Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard situation where Tajay Spears works into that Chuba Hubbard role in Carolina and kind of overtakes the guy who was supposed to be the starter coming into the year. I could see both of these guys gaining a lot of value, but I could also see both of them kind of washing out and just being kind of running back fodder for your roster.
They're very volatile, and I will suggest, again, once we go to the vet area, you'll see some of those vet bets. You typically can get those vets. We'll talk about, the Henrys, the Camaras, the Chubbs later on. You can typically get them for cheaper than the Javonte, than the Tajay Spears. Obviously, we know inherently that the value accrual upside of Chubb, Kamara, Derrick Henry is non-existent compared to these running backs. But the only way I would take Javonte or Tajay Spears is if I'm A, getting a discount, or B, I'm a house money team and project them to increase value when I'm trying to compete next year. When I'm dealing in this type of area, let's just say I have a 206 asset and I have the choice between buying Javonte, Tajay versus some of those other veteran producers, I would probably lean more so towards those vet producers that we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah, exactly. These guys have questionable workloads. They have ability. We're pretty much betting on ability and youth with these guys. That's essentially what it is.
Yeah.
And they also have draft capital in their favor, second round pick and third round pick respectively. So these guys are interesting, like I said, or like you just said, actually, where if you're competing, you probably don't even want to take the risk on these guys. Just go and get the sure bet for volume, like a Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, somebody like that. Or if you're a house money team, you can maybe bet on this guy as like your third running back. Hopefully he works into a full workload and work into your flex. But again, these are volatile bets to make. Then we get into kind of guys that we would give up like mid to late second round picks for. And these guys are definitely not sure things whatsoever. You have Jalen Wright, Chase Brown, Zamir White. I would say he's the surest bet for a workload here, but we're not high on the ability of Zamir White. Zach Charbonnet, high on the ability of him, but he doesn't really have a workload unless Kenneth Walker gets injured. Blake Corum and Marshawn Lloyd probably project as handcuffs year one, given that Kyron Williams had a big workload last year, and Marshawn Lloyd's behind Josh Jacobs, who, of course, has been probably one of the better workload carriers in the league the last couple of years. With all of these guys, I mean, Chase Brown and Zamir White have the clearest path to touches. Jalen Wright probably has the highest upside, given that he's in the Miami Dolphins offense. Zach Charbonnet, the best handcuff of this group. Blake Corum and Lloyd, like they're all of these guys have major concerns, which is why we can't really give up anything more than a mid to late second rounder for any of these guys. But young teams, house money rosters, like I would love to have 2 or 3 of these dudes on my team. Like if I have I actually have a house money team in our No Flocking League where I have, I believe Jonathan Brooks is my RB1. And then I think I have like a Corum and a Lloyd, like just having a bunch of guys like this where, you know, midway through the season or next season, even you look at your roster and you're like, yeah, I actually have like 2 or 3 pretty decent projections at running back. And that's less work you have to do in the 2025 class to fill out your running back position.
And it's funny because like a lot of times, like these are the type of running backs, especially if you're trying to get from a rebuilding roster where they're almost kind of like throw-ins and deals. Like, let's just say you make an offer to a house money team and you're giving them, or a house money team, you're a rebuilding team. You are the house money team. You are giving them, let's just say 2 firsts for a big wide receiver piece. Like, I don't know, Garrett Wilson. Like if you just say, hey, yeah, I don't know if I do that straight up, but if you throw Blake Corum on there, I'll do it. Like, they have no incentive to keep that Blake Corum is basically what I'm trying to say. A lot of these running back projections in this area, once you get up to the Spears and the Javonte, it kind of feels like they have a set cost. They do believe that there's a market value for them. So it's hard to get those guys off of the manager's hands. But once you get into the Wright, the Brown, the Zamir White, the Charbonnet, the Corum, the Lloyd area, it kind of feels like these guys are just kind of being given away in packages.
Yeah, everybody's going to like somebody in this tier. Like, I'm sure you guys listening to this right now, you might be like, how is Zamir White in this tier? He should be in the Javonte Tajay Spears tier. How is Chase Brown in this tier? He should be higher. How is Jalen Wright in this tier? Like, I'm sure there's somebody in this tier that you think doesn't belong here, but I think there's enough concerns with all of these guys, whether it be ability, their offense, their workload, whatever the case is, that they do kind of belong in this area where if you have them, you could sell them for a mid to late second. I wouldn't really bat an eye on that. But also if you want to just hold them, if you're a house money team or if you're a contender with like these guys, like I have a contending roster where I have Achane and Pacheco as my top 2 running backs, and Zamir White, I guess, projects as my third best, competitive asset running back. I have a bunch of guys like that. And to me, that's like how you'd want to hold these guys if you're going to hold them. It's like, if he has good production, I could actually use him in my lineup where I could sell him beforehand, but I'm not going to get a mid to late second in the league that we're in because nobody values Zamir White in that league.
No, like you'd be lucky to get a third in some of our leagues. That's kind of where it's at. Obviously, we're going to keep, the actual market value projections because you guys do play in leagues that running backs are valued. But I will say in the majority of the leagues that we're in, even if we say this is about the equivalent cost of these running backs, the way that they go on the market is probably about 80 to 90% of this cost.
Yeah, like there's leagues I'm sure that I'm in right now where I could send an early projected third in 2025 for Chase Brown if I wanted to. And I'm a big Chase Brown guy too. And I believe that he has an ability to win out his backfield. And that's why I have him ranked rather aggressively. But Zach Moss is still there, so I can't rank him really any higher than this. And they paid Zach Moss and he had a good season last year. So again, all these guys pretty volatile. The last tier that we're going to get into, the cornerstones, then we'll move on to the veteran guys. These are mainly made up of the rookies. I mean, Audric Estime, Tyrone Tracy, Ray Davis, Kamani Vidal, Isaac Garendo, and Bucky Irving are all rookies here, except for Keaton Mitchell, who would be a lot higher than this if he didn't blow his ACL out. So with all of these guys, they're kind of just like I said, if you have a house money team, like in that No Flocking League, I got like 3 or 4 of these dudes behind Jonathan Brooks and Blake Corum and like some of those guys. They're the perfect guys to have on your roster because worst case scenario, Kamani Vidal pops up as like this year's Elijah Mitchell, and you could maybe flip him for an early second rounder and re-roll him into a better running back prospect next year. or you could re-roll him into a wide receiver, or like you said, you can use him in a package deal, package Kamani Vidal in a first rounder and buy low on like Travis Etienne if he's having a rough start to the season or whatever. So for me, it's like, I look at these guys and they're great depth. That's the way I look at them. They're good depth running backs to have for a rebuild.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned Keaton Mitchell because he was on his way to being way higher than this. Like, we could have been talking about this guy probably even in that late first, early second tier if he never tears his ACL. Because to be honest, prior to that Jaguars play where like his knee bended in, like I hope he's fully healthy coming into the season because it did look ugly when it happened. I actually believe we're in Buffalo the week that it happened. We were watching it on the night game, but I mean, this is a guy who on his touches last year, yes, limited workload, 58 total opportunities, but 8.43 yards per carry, 8.45 yards per target. Like, this is incredibly insane efficiency. Like, we're talking about what Devon Achane was doing this year level of efficiency, and we're talking about it on that Baltimore Ravens offense. Now, obviously, with Derrick Henry coming in, with him coming off the ACL, you have to kind of view him more so as a dart throw rather than a sure bet, but he's still a guy where if I'm in a dynasty startup and he starts falling in the 15th, 16th, 17th round area, like, I will be taking my Keaton Mitchell because I do feel like he was a good player prior to the injury.
Yeah, and I mean the rest of these guys too. I know all like the ship chasing guys and like all the zero RB, like everybody's a fan of this running back class because they're so affordable, right? Like you never have to draft. RB6 in a rookie class is usually like a top 100 pick in best ball normally. And like we're getting these guys in like the 140s, 150s, 160s. It's like, yeah, I'll take my Audric Estime shares in best ball. I'll take my Ray Davis shares in best ball. I'll take my Kamani Vidal, my Isaac Garendo shares in best ball, because we kind of all understand that like if they get workloads, they have a chance to really pay off year one to the tune of these Elijah Mitchell, Michael Carter, Tyler Algier, Damian Pierces of years past.
It's just such low opportunity cost. Like, for example, I mean, we talked about, let's just talk about specifically Tyrone Tracy right now because I searched his name, but it's a guy I had as my pre-draft RB7, goes in a spot while he doesn't go day 2, goes in a spot on day 3 where Devin Singletary obviously is the main leader for touches there for the Giants. But if Tracy is the talent that I think he is, he can easily end up working into that workload. And he's currently going off the board as the 181st overall player on Underdog.
Well, yeah, and from a dynasty perspective, he was in my undrafted free agents video. Like, we're talking about a guy that, like, you literally didn't even have to spend a rookie pick on, or you spent a really late one on most of these guys. A lot of these guys were 4th rounders, late 3rd rounders, whatever. Like, Ray Davis, Audric Estime, probably the highest of this group in terms of, and Bucky Irving, too. Maybe you had to spend a mid-3rd on these guys, but for the most part, you were getting these guys in the 4th round of dynasty rookie drafts, and they've kind of vaulted themselves, at least in our opinion, up the cornerstone running back rankings because they're just kind of lotto tickets. If you have, like, there's rosters where I have 2 or 3 of these dudes as my RB 2, 3, and 4 on a team where I'm barren at running back. I have a loaded wide receiver core, a loaded quarterback core, and a solid tight end. It's like, that's how you get these house money rosters. It's like, you know, if whatever happens, Ray Davis has a big workload year 1 and Audric Estime is the starter for the Broncos. It's like, I could actually compete at that point in time because I didn't spend anything on these guys. Like, the rest of my roster is built up really strong, and I just got these guys as like 3rd, 4th round rookie picks.
Yeah, and from a strategy standpoint, I mean, obviously this is more of a micro looking at the landscape, the specific players, but from a macro standpoint, this is why we love going RB fragile in our drafts. This is why we love going with late dart throws with a ton of upside, because guess what? When you build out the more talented positions like the quarterbacks, like the wide receivers, like the tight ends, you can then focus on the running back position, which is more inherently workload based than talent based. And you can hit on the Garendos, you can hit on the Vidals, you can hit on the Ray Davises, because who knows, man? You never know when one of those guys ends up turning into Kyron Williams.
Yeah, I mean, like, other than Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, and like Will Shipley, like none of these guys really landed in bad spots. All of them landed in areas where there could be opportunity, either one injury away or even some standalone roles like Tyrone Tracy and Ray Davis might have this year, Estime as well. So we could probably pivot into the veteran running backs. Yeah. So again, if you're drafting cornerstone running backs, it's probably because you're a house money team. You're trying to 1-year punt, which is basically all that house money teams mean. If we've said that term a lot and we haven't defined it. Or you're just in a long-term rebuild and you're just taking cheap, productive dart throws, or you have one of those top guys. With these veteran running backs, we are honestly basing this more so on their redraft projection because all of these guys are 25 or older, right? Travis Etienne, Isaiah Pacheco, Rachaad White, these guys are like the youngest of this group. And even those guys only have like 2-year windows where we feel really confident projecting them out. So even though they're like being compared to like Derrick Henry in this example, where Derrick Henry is like over 30 years old,
Yeah.
the point of this is that they're really not an edge from an age perspective. They're still in their prime, going to be depreciating assets at least 1 year from now. Like when ETN is 26 next year, when Jonathan Taylor is 26 next year, we're not thinking them as young running backs anymore. We're already not really thinking them of them as young running backs. So this top tier, you have McCaffrey, you have Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Travis Etienne. McCaffrey and Barkley are both first-round redraft picks, first-round best ball picks. Jonathan Taylor, mid-second round redraft best ball pick. And then Etienne I have ranked in my third round. So with these guys, they're all just good redraft projections. It's kind of all what you're looking for. If you're in a 1 year, gotta have it, gotta win this year, maybe you go after a McCaffrey or a Barkley because they're the better projection from a redraft standpoint. But if you have, like, say, a young team coming out of a rebuild and you need a 2 to 3 year window, Jonathan Taylor and ETN maybe make a little bit more sense from that perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree here. McCaffrey, first overall player. You said Saquon Barkley, first rounder. He's more of an early second right now in terms of ADP, 15th overall. But regardless, 1-2 turn type of areas where Barkley should be going off the board. Taylor, same type of area there, 15.1 for Barkley, 15.7 for Taylor. The one I will say with Travis Etienne, he is very fascinating because he is the same age as these guys, and he goes about 20 picks later in terms of best ball ADP. It's kind of, in my opinion, if we were to break it up, it would be like if Hall, Gibbs, and Bijan are like the top of the young running backs, and then Achane and Kyron Williams are like that sub tier beneath. ETN would kind of be that guy for me, where I do view Barkley, Taylor, McCaffrey, if I'm buying a vet running back, as the clear better options. But also, I do much prefer ETN to the guys below him.
Yeah, it's tough because ETN in my opinion, has to be ahead of like a Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco type, because he was a first round pick. He's got more team control. He has more cachet around the league if he does hit free agency to get a bigger contract and that kind of thing. But he also can't be like quite, like you said, on the production level of a Saquon, of a Jonathan Taylor, of a McCaffrey. But I believe a lot in the Jags, the offense, to bounce back this year, which is kind of why I put ETN in this area. He is a year younger than all these guys too. He's 25 years old. Other than Taylor, he's a year younger than everyone here. So that's kind of, again, you're balancing like a 2 to 3 year window versus a 1 to 2 year window with Barkley, as an example, where Barkley will probably be the better projection this year, but ETN might give you an extra year of RB1 or top 15 production.
Like, for what it's worth, if we were to equate it right now, you are in your rookie draft and you kind of want to know what these picks are relative. McCaffrey, pending the market that you're in, is probably worth about the 104, 105 area based on ADP. Probably closer to 105, 106 based off how we'd value him, but I can see him more so going in the early portion of the third in a lot of your drafts. For our drafts, we'd more so value him as a mid to late third rounder. Jonathan Taylor, probably worth somewhere between the 108 to 110. Same thing with Saquon Barkley. ETN, probably closer to the 110, 111 area if you were to trade for him.
Yeah, exactly. All these guys, and same goes with future picks too. Like if you're selling a projected late first because you're a contender and you need a running back and ETN's available, like I'm okay doing it, but maybe you want to go after Taylor or Barkley and see if you can get it for the same price tag, because it's possible that ETN's cheaper, but maybe you're getting a bit of a better production window there with the other guys. So the next tier down was that late first, early second. If you recall, in the same value area, we had like Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, Kenneth Walker, those type of guys. And then Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco are both, they're still young running backs, but they are over 25, right? They were older prospects coming out. They do have like 1 to 2 years left of team control, which is great because they were both 2022 draft pick guys. But at the same time, they're a little bit older than Kenneth Walker, a little bit older than James Cook, who were in the same running back class. So that's kind of where they stack up. It's a little odd calling them veterans and not the other guys because they were in the same draft class, but it's just the way that their age kind of stacked up. With Rachaad White and Isaiah Pacheco, I mean, both of these guys to me are pretty good values right now in underdog drafts, where you're getting both of them in like the third, fourth round. And I think both of these guys have the case to continue what they did last year. Pacheco took a big step from a receiving workload standpoint, commanded all that goal line work, all of the rushing work, and saw absolutely nothing added really in his backfield for the NFL draft. He is going to be the lead dog there. And Rachaad White, Bucky Irving was added, and everybody likes to shit on Rachaad White and say that he's not actually that good. But to be honest, man, I still feel very confident as a Bucs fan and everything that they've said about him, that he is going to be the lead back here. And Bucky Irving is going to take over the role that Chase Edmonds was playing last year, which was like a 20-30% change of pace guy. I think that Rachaad White absolutely will still be like a 70% opportunity share running back this year.
Yeah, so the way I kind of view this tier, obviously, we mentioned the headliners of this tier. Like, if you're talking overall, we'll talk about the overall landscape in a second, so you guys can get the idea. But for reference here, Benson, Brooks are going to be in this area. We mentioned obviously Pacheco, Jacobs, White. I personally have Pacheco the leader of this group because obviously it's the best projectable offense. I think him or Jacobs, from a real life talent standpoint, are the better running backs to Rashad White. And with Pacheco, like we said, we saw him really come onto the scene last year. And I do feel like when it comes to Isaiah Pacheco, when I'm judging the Chiefs backfield versus the Bucks and versus the Packers at this current point, I do feel like there's less backfield competition.
Yeah, I can get there. I think Rashad, like I have Pacheco and Rashad White back to back in my rankings, so you could really argue them one way or another. I think the PPR upside of Rashad White is the reason I have him a bit ahead, and he was also a 3rd round pick in the NFL draft, so I think maybe he has more long term staying power with the team or in free agency if he were to hit it. Again, you could argue that Pacheco's the better running back. I really wouldn't argue with you too much. He's probably the better pure runner for sure. But Rashad White does have a great receiving skill set, and I saw him get a lot better as a Bucs fan last year. He looked a lot better by the season's end than he did at the beginning of the season when he was extremely inefficient early on. And then with Jacobs too, like he's a challenging one to stack up because Josh Jacobs, 26 years old, him and Saquon Barkley were the crown jewels of the running back free agency market. And he got a very good contract. Now he's tethered to a really good offense with a young core. He's the only real veteran in that offense, to be honest. Everybody's like 24 years old and under, including the quarterback pretty much. So for me, with Jacobs, they're talking about dialing his workload back. And like, he is not going to get the workload that he got in Las Vegas. Like, no. There's no denying that he is not going to get that workload with Marshawn Lloyd added, with AJ Dillon there. But honestly, dude, we've never seen Josh Jacobs without a huge workload. Like, you know how challenging it is to be efficient on your touches when you're getting 300-400 a year? It's really hard. And knowing that Matt LaFleur is going to maybe use him as like that Aaron Jones, 220, 275 touch guy, Josh Jacobs might show us efficiency that we really haven't seen out of him to this point in his career. In 2022, obviously he had that monster season, but he was doing that with a big workload, man. Like, we haven't seen him in this good of an offense with a decreased workload to the point that he's not going to get banged up.
Yeah, I mean, the best comparable, I would say, again, keep in mind this is a 15 gamer versus like this is basically how I would project the touches for a 17 game sample size. But we did see him finish as the overall RB11 in 2021 on, what is that, 281 overall opportunities. Yes,
I don't even think he's going to get that many touches.
You don't think he'll get 281? Games,
to be honest,
281 opportunities.
I mean, he might, man, but like, I think they're going to use Lloyd. I think they're going to keep him fresh, but he is going to get all the high value touches, in my opinion. Like, people like hype up Marshawn Lloyd's receiving abilities. Like, Josh Jacobs is a better receiver than Marshawn Lloyd, and he's a better goal line back than both of the other guys on the roster. Like, if you use Josh Jacobs in a great, like, I think this offense, like, this team could win 12 games, dude. Like, this is a really good team, and Josh Jacobs could be the lead ball carrier, the lead goal line guy. Like, dude, he had his monster season in Las Vegas, and it was him and Devontae Adams carrying Derek Carr that whole year. Like, he's an ancillary piece in this offense right now.
And it's funny because obviously his former teammate Devontae Adams, obviously Jacobs goes to his former team with the Green Bay Packers, but I mean, like, I still think he'll get a workload. I still think he could command, upwards of 290, 300 overall opportunities. I think he could be an 18 to 20 opportunity per game back. But like you said, because of how good this projectable offense is, with how good Jordan Love looked down the stretch, I thought he looked like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And to be honest, if he keeps taking the stretches that I saw at the end of last year, especially when he came to Dallas in that playoff game, literally played a perfect game at the quarterback position, I can see him vaulting himself similar to that top 5 type of area, to be honest. I really do feel like the talent is there. And if Jordan Love is that type of ascending piece at quarterback, man, like, we're talking about valuable 18 to 20 opportunities on what should be a top 5 to 8 offense.
Yeah, not to mention at 26 years old, he has a chance to really extend his career and play 2 or 3 more productive years, not getting 400 touches a season or 350 touches a season like he was getting with the Las Vegas Raiders. So yeah, I feel really good about Jacobs as like, you want to sell your projected late first for a running back this year. I don't think Josh Jacobs is a guy that you're going to really regret doing that for. Maybe he doesn't have a top 5 ceiling because he's not going to get the workload he got in Vegas. But if he's RB7 in points per game with a 18 point per game season or 17 point per game season, I think that's kind of what you're looking at here. And that's going to be a very solid RB1, RB2 for a contending roster.
And for what it's worth with Jacobs right now, I mean, we were talking about this off camera. He's going to be a guy that we have a lot higher than the consensus in best ball, and it makes us want to go and do some drafts right now. Obviously on Ontario, like we're going to have to go to Buffalo or something, but like Jacobs is a guy that we view as a legitimate second round best ball pick. He is currently going off the board with a 37.6 overall ADP, despite seeing a huge upgrade to his offense.
Yeah, exactly. So even if he loses 10, 20% of his workload, I really don't care, because I think that we're going to tack on 6 to 7 rushing touchdowns and better efficiency on top of it. And that was the problem with Jacobs last year. He wasn't efficient last year because he's just gotten so many big workloads after so many big workloads in bad offenses. It doesn't shock me that he's starting to like wear down a little bit, and keeping him fresh might be the smartest thing for him. So next tier of running backs here, all these guys, throw them in a hat in terms of what you're looking for. With Ramondre Stevenson, DeAndre Swift, you're getting a little bit more youth than the rest of the guys in this tier, but you're not getting as good of a redraft projection. So if you're, strictly drafting a competitive roster, you already have 7 or 8 players on your roster, and you're looking for a pick in round 8, round 9, and you want to go with Derrick Henry over DeAndre Swift or Ramondre Stevenson, that's fine with me, honestly. Like if you have a really competitive team and you want to do that, but if you're building a little bit more of a balanced approach where you got a young team that's like a 2 to 3 year window, Ramondre Stevenson and DeAndre Swift, I think, honestly, are both undervalued in terms of best ball right now. I think both of them could have like top 15 seasons, and it wouldn't really shock me. Both of them got big upgrades at quarterback in the draft. Like going into the Chicago Bears situation, we knew it was going to be Caleb Williams, but I think he's going to come out guns a-blazing right from the beginning and have a lead the Bears to a pretty productive season on offense. And then Ramondre Stevenson, I mean, we've seen RB1 production from this guy with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi as his quarterbacks and no wide receiver talent around him. Like he has legitimate dudes in his offense now to help take the pressure off a little bit. And all they added was Antonio Gibson, who's fun and maybe can contribute a receiving workload. But honestly, that's no different than what he's been competing for touches with to this point in his Patriots career. And he's on the final year of his contract. Maybe they want to run him into the ground before they let him hit free agency. I think Ramondre Stevenson is one of the more underrated guys in Dynasty right now that you can get for like a mid to late second. We have him valued here as kind of like an early to mid second, but I don't even think you'd have to pay that for him, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I agree. For reference, I actually made a trade involving Ramondre actually in our Flock Me Silly League recently. So I traded away Ramondre because, again, I was a team that punted out of the startup. He fell to me a really good value in the startup. I think I want to say I got him in the 11th or the 12th round when we were doing it. I was able to trade him for basically a 2025 mid-projected second straight up. That's about the range that I would either be willing to sell if I'm not contending, or I'd be willing to buy if I wanted the running back points. Basically, the points we made about Jacobs, a little bit inefficient last year, banged up, big workload. It's kind of applying to Ramondre Stevenson. Obviously, the big difference there is Jacobs, I think, is a slightly better running back and is obviously in a better offense. But with Ramondre Stevenson, you're getting a 3-down skill set. You're getting a guy that can have 60-plus targets next year. You're getting a guy with the size that can punch in 8 to 10 touchdowns. If Drake May is the quarterback I think he is and can carry this offense on his shoulders. Like, I really do feel like this Patriots offense is being treated like one of the worst in the league. But I also feel like there's an upside case here where they're more of a league average projection, maybe slightly below average, rather than the bottom 5 offense people seem to think they are.
Yeah, like we were drafting Ramondre in the mid to late 3rd round of best ball last year, and his projection is better this year, and he's like a 10th round best ball pick. Like, so again, people soured on him because he had a bad season, he was less efficient, but like his projection is actually better. If we just assume he's the same player he was in 2022 when he had an RB1 season, his projection is actually better this season than it was before. So to me, I find myself drafting him a lot in best ball. I guess we haven't done any drafts yet, but I will draft him a lot in best ball. And I find myself targeting him in dynasty trades as well when I'm looking for competitive running backs for those type of teams. Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery. I mean, all 3 of these guys are just good redraft projections. Derrick Henry, a high-end pick for the Baltimore Ravens. He's probably going to have a lot of goal line opportunity this year, even if he has lost a step. Even if he's not the same running back, he's going to have a chance to punch in a lot of touchdowns, and you could just copy and paste the same statement for Joe Mixon. Only Joe Mixon's a little bit younger than Derrick Henry and got a contract extension for whatever reason with the Houston Texans in an offense led by CJ Stroud, with Stephon Diggs, with Nico Collins, with Tank Dell, with Dalton Schultz at tight end. They're going to have red zone opportunities galore, and that's pretty much what Joe Mixon feasted on in Cincinnati, and he's been essentially a back-end RB1, high-end RB2 for like 5+ years now, and it annoys me because I don't think Joe Mixon is very good, but he's probably going to be exactly the same projection he's been in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and it's funny because we'll talk about like Najee Harris in a second, but if I said that Ramondre Stevenson was a poor man's Josh Jacobs, it's almost like, well, again, once we talk about Najee Harris is like a poor man's Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon is going to be in a top 10 scoring offense this year. If CJ Stroud is a quarterback that everybody, including us, thinks he could be a top 5 to 10 quarterback in the NFL. This Houston offense can be a top 5 to 10 offense in the league. They have the receiving weapons, an improved offensive line. Obviously, Bobby Slowick calling the run offense where, man, like you just kind of got to plug your nose, take Joe Mixon and say, hey, like I'm probably going to get the RB 14 in points per game. And I'm cool with that because if that costs me the 205 in my draft at this current point, which by the way, if somebody, especially a team that contended 2 years ago is trying to get rid of production and trying to enter a rebuild, you won't have to pay the 205 for Joe Mixon. I've seen rooms where Joe Mixon is being let go for a late 2. And again, it is stinky. It feels gross when you're buying Joe Mixon. I don't think he is a very good football player, but the offense is doing its work, man, like it did in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and he knows how to carry a workload too. I mean,
yeah.
This is the one year I'm not waxing poetic about the running back age and touch apex, and it'll definitely be the year where all these guys fall off a cliff because of that. Yeah. But at the same time, I got to respect the projection that you have with Joe Mixon here. It's David Montgomery is the one guy that I feel a little uneasy about because I think the market actually views him almost a tier ahead of these dudes. But to be honest, like, I mean, he's the same age as Joe Mixon, and he has a worse projection. We just talked about it. On a couple occasions where second-year running backs get bigger workloads into their second year. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to take over a bigger piece of this pie in Detroit. And I think David Montgomery's like 10 to 15 touchdown upside is going to look a lot less likely than it did last year coming into the season because now Jahmyr Gibbs, instead of being like a 40, 50% snap share half the year, is like a 60, 70% snap share. And he's actually eating up more goal line opportunity than he was in the past. I think everybody's just assuming David Montgomery is going to do exactly what he did last year. And I don't think that's the case. I think he's going to be worse than he was last year.
I'll fight back on that because even though he did see his touches inherently go down once Jahmyr Gibbs at the end of the season was getting that role for 12th overall draft capital. Like we assumed throughout the year last year that Gibbs's touches would be scaled up, that David Montgomery's would be scaled down. And it ended up actualizing even when David Montgomery came back. Jahmyr Gibbs got more touches. David Montgomery got less. But when you're actually looking at how they were used, Montgomery still had 7 rushing touchdowns weeks 10 to 18. Like this was still a guy that was pretty much banking a touchdown 90% of the games that he was playing. So I understand from a pure overall touch volume standpoint that it's going to be less than it was last year, specifically at the early portion of the year. But if he still has this high implied touchdown total, which I do think he does, I think at this point, given how he's used on the goal line, given how strong we project this Lions offense, we can pretty much shoe him in for over 10 touchdowns. I'm fine with him at this current portion, like back end RB2 in Dynasty, this type of area, mid-second in terms of valuation. But I do agree that the upside maybe isn't there for some of these running backs. But I do think given the projection of this offense, given the projection of his workload on the goal line, his floor is higher than these guys.
I just don't think he's going to carry the same role on the goal line. I think everything we know about fantasy football is second year running backs command bigger workloads in their second years. And I think Jahmyr like even if it's David Montgomery's role to be the goal line back, I just think the opportunities are going to be less than they were last year for David Montgomery. I think we're talking about a guy that rushes for like 800 yards and has 8 touchdowns and he's RB 31 in points per game and nobody's excited about him.
Yeah, I mean, like excited, sure. Like he's David Montgomery. You're not buying him to get excited. You're buying him because he's got a solid touchdown projection.
Right. But when I compare him to the guys in the tier below him, Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, like I think those guys have higher ceilings than him and like similar projections.
I can't see it.
Dude, Alvin Kamara was like significantly better than him last year.
For sure, but David Montgomery's got the goal line role on a top 5 to 10 projectable offense. Like
Kamara has all the receiving upside in his offense, which I'd rather have.
Offense.
It's more reliable. It's more projected.
In a garbage offense.
Right, but it's Derek Carr. He's going to check it down 87 times next year.
Who knows? Maybe his wide receivers stay healthy and that doesn't end up being the case.
What wide receivers? Chris Olave and who?
Rashid Shaheed, baby.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Anyways, the next tier running backs, Tony Pollard, Jalen Warren, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler. I would highly recommend you don't purchase these guys. Like don't like send away like an early to mid second because you need a running back, especially not at this moment. Maybe wait until August, September when you actually need that production. Maybe you see them actually play some games and see how they look. for me, man, like it's like if you have these guys on a competitive team, it's like just ride the production, like you can just use them or whatever.
Yeah.
But I would rather have guys in the earlier tiers if you can tier up to them. Like if you can take your Jalen Warren and tier up to DeAndre Swift or Josh Jacobs or Isaiah Pacheco or whatever, like just do that. Don't just like buy Aaron Jones on the open market for the 204 in the rookie draft and just think you're set at running back 2 for the rest of the year.
I mean, the way I would kind of approach this tier is like take like a receiver that hasn't quite worked out and like attach like a 3 to him and try to buy one of these running backs. So for example,
like
I mean
QJ and a 3 for Najee Harris or Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb, somebody like that.
QJ, Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, whatever
Dotson.
players, Jahan Dotson, I would probably more so keep because I believe in him a little bit more than those guys. But that type of principle where it's like wide receivers that once got hyped that at this point we can say probably aren't going to live up to it. And you can attach like a 3 and get at least a running back production piece like a Najee, like a Kamara, like a Chubb. Like if you're dealing with the rebuilding team in the league that is just trying to get rid of these running backs off your team, I can tell you right now, Elijah Moore plus a 3 should be able to get it done.
Yeah. If they're motivated to get Eckler off of their roster or Najee off their roster because they're older and like they should be motivated to get those guys off their roster if they're trying to rebuild, like you said, then that makes some sense there. But again, I would probably want these guys as like my RB3, RB4 on a competitive team. Like if you're relying on these guys as RB1, RB2, you're probably not competitive enough to win your championship. So culmination here is this top 36 running back rankings. Like we said, these guys are all going to interact with each other differently because I mean, generally speaking, when we're going in rebuilds, we're not usually drafting a whole lot of running backs to begin with. But even still, you still want to kind of know what running backs are maybe guys that you could do a 1-year punt around. Maybe you could rebuild around a little bit. And this is kind of how they interact, like we said. So those top 3 guys, obviously head and shoulders. That mid to late first round tier, you have an amalgamation of those 2 young running backs, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, and then the aging productive guys, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, Travis Etienne. Again, that late first, early second range where it's mostly the 2022 running back class, Rachaad White, Isaiah Pacheco, Kenneth Walker, James Cook. And then you also have Josh Jacobs in there as the best like competitive asset. And then you have Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson as the ascending value guys. And then that early to mid second rounder range is just a complete mismatch of guys that could be productive like Ramondre and Javonte and all these dudes. And then guys that we know are going to be productive that are really old like Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery. And then you just got Tajay Spears in there who's like the ultimate wild card. Then the next tier, you have that mid to late seconds range where it's all aging players, Tony Pollard, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler. And then you have the guys that are a little bit younger where Jalen Wright, Jalen Warren, Chase Brown, Zamir White, Zach Charbonnet, Brian Robinson, Blake Corum. Like, is there anything that you'd want to say about the whole landscape of the running back position? And as you guys might notice at the bottom there, all of those guys in the final 2 tiers are worth mid to late seconds. They're just different goals that you're accomplishing. Like if you have a 2 to 3 year winning window, maybe you send a mid to late second for Zamir White or Chase Brown or Jalen Wright or somebody like that. If you're trying to win this year, like you absolutely need to win this year, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, those type of guys make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, at the end of the day, the one thing I will say, obviously, that top tier of running backs is going to cost a pretty penny. We already know this. They're the clear 3 best in terms of dynasty. The one thing I will say is that once you're navigating these tiers, I still don't feel good about paying 100% market value on any single one of these guys. Like where if I'm trading for one of these running backs, I kind of want to trade for them at the 90 to 95% of these prices. But at the same time, if I'm selling them, this would be more the price I would want to sell them for.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you have Christian McCaffrey on your roster and you're trying to rebuild, like you want at least a mid to late first for him, if not potentially more than that. But like, I'm kind of a little scared of buying running backs in this range, like Travis Etienne for a mid to late first rounder is like, do I want to give that up if I'm trying to like push my chips in and become like a contender this year? Makes me a little bit more nervous. And like, same goes even with the later tier running backs here. It's like, do I want to give up an early to mid second rounder potentially for Ramondre Stevenson next year when the running back class is going to be a lot better? It's like, if you believe in Ramondre, and I do, like it's still, it doesn't feel good. You know what I mean? Like you would rather get him for a mid to late second rounder. Like you said, you want to pay about 90% of the price tags that we have listed here. And if you're selling them, I mean, ideally you would want to get more than this. Like if you're trying to sell Rachaad White right now, you want at least a first round pick. You want a late first round pick, but you might not get that on the open market. And especially in leagues that you and I play in, it's like, it's pulling teeth to try and sell running backs off your roster.
Oh, when you say you want a late first for one of these guys, the best offer you're going to get is the 205 plus the 312. That's just what it's going to be.
Exactly. That's like what people are going to offer you for Isaiah Pacheco, who literally is like a top 3-round redraft pick in our opinion. People are going to be like, yeah, I'll give you like the 209 and like the 301 for him. It's like, I'm not doing that. Like but that's the landscape of the running back position. And like, that's why I'm almost like, if you're especially like a house money team or a contender with a lot of pick equity and a lot of assets in general, go get one of these elite guys. Like, go get Bijan, go get Gibbs, go get Hall. Even if it costs you, like, you have to give up the 107 in this year's rookie class. You got to give up your 2025 one, which projects to be late. And like Danny said, like a Blake Corum or like a throw-in piece as Zamir White, or maybe you can throw in a wide receiver that's young, like a Jahan Dotson or something like that. And maybe even like a second on top of that, I'd be willing to give up for Bijan or for Gibbs or for Breece Hall. Like, the people who sell these assets are not going to want anything less than like very solid returns for them.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, that is the whole landscape of the running back position. We went through the young guys, we went through the old guys, we went through the rebuilding strategy, the contending strategy, how these guys kind of interact within a startup. Generally speaking, we go light at this position in startups because usually in the leagues that we play in, you can buy them for cheap when you need them. And if you don't need them, you probably are better off not holding them because they are very volatile and fluctuate in value a ton. So if you want all of our running back rankings on Flock Fantasy, if you want all of our wide receiver rankings, our quarterback rankings, tight end rankings, super flex, one quarterback, dynasty trade value chart, we're going to do a big update to as soon as we're done over here. If you want all that stuff, flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE, 7 days for free, 30% off as well when you sign up with that code. And you'll also get a chance to win a spot into our listener league if you sign up for an annual subscription right now and you fill out the Google form that's down below in the description. We are right now closing in, I think, about 4 or 5 days from now. We're going to draw names from that, and you actually have a pretty good chance of getting into that league when you sign up over there. So if you want a chance to be in a league with Danny and I, we're going to be starting that up probably next week after we draw the names for it. Then that's the best way you can do it. That's the best way you can get a league with us. Sign up for an annual flocker. You get 1 entry, annual mother flocker. You get 2 entries into that league, and you do have to use promo code FSE when you sign up to be eligible for that.
And you have to make sure you fill out the submission, because the last time we filled this up, I had mother flockers message me like, hey, like, how did the drawing go? And they didn't fill out their submission. Like, you have to make sure you go and submit it. Otherwise, we don't know if you're interested in the league.
Yeah, so the Google form that's in the pinned comment and in the description, if you don't fill it out and you're an annual flocker or annual mother flocker, you won't be in the league, because we're not going to go through, like, we don't know if you want to be in the league unless you fill it out, right? It's on you guys if you want to be in the league to indicate that you're interested, because we're not going to go through every single person that we have on the site and ask them if they want to be in the league when we're pulling names for it. So just fill out the form after you sign up over there. And again, you get tons of content, Dynasty Rookie Guide, trade value charts, Dynasty Trade Calculator, team reviews right now. Also, if you sign up as an annual mother flocker, you get a free team review on the site. You can submit a team to us using our My Teams feature, and we'll go through it, let you know what you need to work on, let you know what you're doing well, and all that kind of stuff. So that'll interest you. Check it out down below. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.